Yo, what's up? Today's video is just going to be a bit of a voiceover of this shopping trip I went on to Haight Street. If you don't know what Haight Street is, it's this street in San Francisco, just like one straight street, and on both sides there's stores all over. And 9 out of 10 of those stores are like those vintage curated clothing stores. And I decided I might as well check it out because I've been here before, but back then I wasn't like as interested in fashion and stuff. Because this is kind of like a recent development for me, so I'm just trying to see all the outlets and like places where you can get some nice looking clothes, you know what I mean? Anyway, these first few stores that you're seeing in the background, I was just kind of trying to figure out my camera, but they were some pretty nice places. I don't have the names of all of them off like the top of my head that I'll list in this video, but if you want to know any specific place, I'll definitely be able to find it, and just leave a comment and I'll tell you. For the store I'm looking in right now, they have some like military surplus type stuff. I think it's pretty cool, but I did come here looking for some specific things, which are pinstripe pants and loafers, because it is like a trendy look, but I do genuinely think it looks good, and I'm trying to get into more formal or like elevated casual wear, so that's what I was on the lookout for on this overall trip. I will comment on some of like the nice things I saw, but I also want to take this video as an opportunity to just kind of talk about fashion in general and like how I see it, because in terms of the internet, fashion has become very accessible to like the everyday person, and if you want to like get into it per se, you have a lot of tools, and I would say that's kind of the stage I'm at, because I essentially got into fashion like, let's say, last August, and I keep saying get into fashion, like that's a very vague phrase, but it all starts, I'd say, with like caring more for your looks, whether that's just for yourself or how you present yourself to others. That's kind of what motivated me at the start and what's motivating me currently, because before last year in August, I legitimately didn't buy like any of my clothes or even pick them out. I'd get them as like gifts or just for like necessity, like if I didn't have socks or if I needed something for a sport, I'd just get that, and like whatever's cheaper, and like my family might pick it out for me. So it might sound weird to a lot of people that have been kind of independent in their fashion sense throughout most of their life, but the point I'm trying to make is all these videos I'm making about like clothes and stuff, they are very basic, but they kind of are the beginning steps that I'm at in terms of discovering the type of fashion I like, and overall just building the foundation for my style as I become an adult and go into college soon. It seems like a very appropriate time to be doing this sort of thing, at least for me, because as you grow as a kid, your tastes change like very easily, I'd say, and I'd say that's true for me too, but at least recently I felt a lot more thoughtful, or I realized I put a lot more time into thinking about the things I do, whether they're hobbies or work or whatnot, in this case fashion. So this was kind of just a whole rant, but I was pretty much just trying to give like context and background to, I guess, my goal with videos like these and like going out in the first place to look for clothes. A lot of times it is really not that deep, and it's not that deep for me either. I'm at the end of the day, I'm just trying to look nice and feel comfortable, which is like the main thing, but I do find it nice to share my thought process sometimes, because there's so many people in the world, and at the end of the day, you'll definitely be able to find someone that relates to you on like specific levels, if that makes sense. So that's kind of why I like to elaborate on all the stuff I talk about. Anyway, that was pretty much my whole rant. I'm sure it was pretty nonsensical to a lot of people, so I'm sorry for that. I hope you skipped through it if that's how it was. But onto what's actually happening in the video. There's a lot of cool stores. I think something I realized here was really the difference between a thrift store and a vintage curated store. And this is pretty obvious through the names, I guess. The curated things are like picked out, but the main difference I noticed here really was the prices. At this point, I do like realize that good quality clothes cost good money, but if you look at a thrift store and see you can get like 4 items for the price of 1 in these vintage stores, it is kind of something to consider. And also, just taking a break for a second, these boots I'm showing right now are one of my like grails, I guess. They're Rick Owens like mega lace boots. Not those exact pair, I think, but it was cool to see them for sure. And this store I'm in right now, I think it's called Wasteland or something. I might be completely wrong, but it had the most like designer items I saw. And going back to the price thing, they really were high prices, or not so much high prices, but just out of my personal budget. But the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of people online and just like in general will complain about like the prices of like designer items and stuff. And I do agree with that in a sense. You really just have to look at it as fashion as a hobby, because at the end of the day, people can live with like one set of clothes, like realistically, that they got for like $10. Okay, I know I just said realistically, but maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. You could spend the minimal amount on clothing and still get the function out of it, right? So it's just paying the designer price really is for the aesthetics, which, you know, it's a common phrase, fashion over function. That's really what it is to be the type of person that like pays for designer and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just like liking specific art, you know? It's just people have different ways they want to spend their money, and you know, it's okay if you don't agree with that. It's okay if you don't think fashion is worth spending money on. I thought that myself. That's why I was fine with my parents buying me clothes, because I didn't think I would want to wear anything that wasn't just comfortable and cheap.
They made like a snake.
But as you can see now, my opinions have changed. So what I'm getting at in this whole thing is, you can find good clothes at department stores, you can find good clothes at thrift stores, and you can find good clothes at vintage stores. You just have to understand that these are three different things that will usually come at three different price points. And if you think the price of going to a vintage store is worth it in comparison to a thrift store because you find something you like, that's good. Just like this cheesesteak we stopped for in the middle of the whole trip. This is a pretty good place. Anyway, it's kind of like a spoiler. I didn't end up getting anything from any of these clothing stores, mostly because it wasn't specifically what I was looking for, and a lot of things I did like were out of my budget. But that doesn't mean I don't like vintage shopping or coming out here. You know, I did come with my family. If I was by myself, I might have been able to look through stuff more, but you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm trying to say is, some people will try vintage shopping and they'll be put off by the price, or they'll try thrifting and they just won't find anything they like and they don't like the idea of wearing secondhand. Or they'll go to a department store and they won't like, you know, the ethical practices, which, you know, is a very big deal and people should stick to their principles. But keeping that in mind, none of these things are set in stone. You know, a billion thrift stores exist, a billion department stores exist. They're not all the same. Of course, a lot of them follow, you know, the same groundwork, but what I'm getting at is, you know, if you go to vintage shopping one time and you don't like it or you don't find anything, it's okay to try again. And if you go thrifting one time and don't find anything you like, you can try again. And, you know, I also believe at the same time that you shouldn't force yourself to do something you don't like. So if you try like 5 times and you don't like it, then it's okay, just let it go. But at least in my intro stage of getting into fashion, trying different places besides, you know, just like Target or Ross, it definitely is interesting to, you know, just consider the options you have. It's really that simple. Like, I'm trying to make this a big point, but what I'm just trying to say is, look at the options you have and you might find something you like. Anyway, I think that's pretty much the end of me talking about clothes. I was just kind of getting my opinion out there, and if you disagree with it, that's fine. I'd actually like to hear people's thoughts on this topic. But as you can see now, we headed over to Amoeba Music looking for some records. I'm looking through my Discogs. Most of the time I can't find what I want in Amoeba because a lot of it's like foreign music, and for some reason they don't stock any like modern foreign music. But you know, that's okay. Just looking around a bit. And also, if you haven't been to Amoeba, it's a pretty nice store. I think it's only in California. It has a couple locations, but most of them are pretty nice. I think the best one I've been to is in LA. It has like the biggest selection, but overall it has a lot of stuff. I was taking a look at these record bags to hold some of my LPs, but they were like $50, and at that point I could just get, you know, a record or two or a couple CDs, so it wasn't worth it in the moment. But I think as an investment, one of these things would be nice to have. Anyway, I'm getting kind of close to the end of this video, and I realized I was pretty much talking like the whole time, so if you don't like that style, please let me know. Actually, I'd like to know. I kind of want to make more videos like without dialogue, or just testing out different ways to incorporate myself into the videos or leave myself out, so I would appreciate just the opinions on the video style in general. And again, I'm sorry that a lot of my points are kind of like disconnected. I'm kind of just talking off the dome, and like what I see in the video, I'm just talking over it. So if you want them to be more kind of like concrete points and like scripted, let me know that too, because what's the point of talking if you can't get some sort of idea across, right? So criticisms are definitely appreciated on this, whole channel. Lastly, I did find a lot of things on like my want list on Discogs, like this My Bloody Valentine, but I decided not to pick it up and instead got this record I've never heard of just because I like the cover. And usually I don't do that. Usually I'll listen to a record on like streaming before buying it, but I decided to mix it up today and get this, and I might do a record review later, but that's pretty much the whole video. Thank you for watching. Yeah.